Welcome back. This is Chris. The date today is September 27th, year of our Savior, 2016. Bible study 105. Bible study 105. The title of this Bible study is Christmas Part 2. Yes, Christmas Part 2. Now, we left off talking about Christmas last Bible study, and all this is about exoteric or external paganism. Now, the name, let's see, a review here. Numbers and the letters of the alphabet were magical and became the first songs. Simply by singing the alphabet, they could call you into the presence of the gods. You will remember that David numbered Israel without authority and brought a plague upon the people. He was too fearful to go out to the tabernacle to inquire of God and was permitted, because of his faithlessness, to build an alternate altar in Jerusalem. The name Zer-Nebo-Gus is almost pure Chaldee and seems to unfold itself as denoting the seed of the prophet Cush. We have seen reason already to conclude that under the name of Bel, as distinguished from Baal, Cush was the great soothsayer or false prophet worshipped at Babylon. But independent inquirers have been led to the conclusion that Bel and Nebo were just two different titles for the same God, and that a prophetic God. Thus does Kitto comment on the words of Isaiah 46 verse 1, Bel boweth down, Nebo stoopeth. With reference to the latter name, the word seems to come from Nibba, to deliver an oracle or to prophesy, and hence would mean an oracle, and may thus, as Calmet suggests, commentaire literal, be no more than another name for Bel himself, or a characterizing epithet applied to him, it being not unusual to repeat the same thing in the same verse in equivalent terms. Zer-Nebo-Gus, the great seed of the prophet Cush, was, of course, Nimrod, for Cush was Nimrod's father. And that's taken from 2 Babylons, page 34. There was another way in which Nimrod's power was symbolized besides by the horn. A synonym for Geber, the mighty one, was Aber, while Aber also signified a wing. Nimrod, as head and captain of those men of war by whom he surrounded himself and who were the instruments of establishing his power, was Baal Abirin, or Lord of the Mighty Ones. But Baal Abirin, pronounced nearly in the same way, signified the winged one, and therefore in symbol he was represented not only as a horned bull, but as at once a horned and winged bull, as showing not merely that he was mighty himself, but that he had mighty ones under his command who were ever ready to carry his will into effect and to put down all opposition to his power. And to shadow forth the vast extent of his might, he was represented with great and wide expanding wings. 2 Babylon, pages 37 to 38. Continuing the quote, looking at the subject in the light of the Bacchanalian orgies, which, as the reader has seen, commemorated the history of Nimrod, it is evident that he led mankind to seek their chief good in sensual enjoyment and showed them how they might enjoy the pleasures of sin. This is all carnal. Remember, when you're dealing with the battle of the flesh, right? Romans 7, Paul talks about, the spirit and the flesh, they war against each other. Even if you're saved, you need to take the cross on daily, because the flesh is unconverted. The spirit is converted, okay? Remember that only spirit will inherit the kingdom of God, where we get a new body. Important to understand that. Now, this sensual enjoyment, and showed them how they might enjoy the pleasures of sin without any fear of the wrath of a holy God. In his various expeditions, he was always accompanied by troops of women, and by music and song and games and revelries and everything that could please the natural heart. he commended himself to the good graces of mankind. Continuing the quote, that's page 55. Now, as the cup was peculiarly the symbol of Cush, hence the pouring out of the drink offering to him as the god of the cup, as he was the great diviner, hence the divinations as to the future year, which Jerome connects with the divinity referred to by Isaiah. Now, Hermes in Egypt as the numberer was identified with the moon that numbers the months. He was called Lord of the Moon, taken from Bunsen, and as the dispenser of time, Wilkinson. He held a palm branch emblematic of a year. Thus then, if Gad was the sun divinity, Mene was very naturally regarded as the Lord of the Moon. Continuing the quote, that's page 95. Mene or Mene signifies the numberer, and it is by the changes of the moon that the months are numbered. Psalm 104, verse 19. We'll have Stephen verify what I'm reading. It's in Roman numerals. Psalm 104, verse 19 states, go ahead, brother.
He appointed the moon for seasons. The sun knoweth his going down.
Okay, perfect. The name of the man of the moon, or the god who presided over that luminary among the Saxons, was Mane, M-A-N-E, as given in the Edda, and Mani in the Voluspa. Ibid, page 94. Continuing, that it was the birth of the Lord Moon that was celebrated among our ancestors. At Christmas, we have remarkable evidence in the name that is still given in the lowlands of Scotland to the feast on the last day of the year, which seems to be a remnant of the old birth festival, for the cakes then made are called Nur cakes or birth cakes. That name is Hogmanay. Now, Hogmanay in Chaldee signifies the feast of the numberer. In other words, the feast of Dos Lunas, or the man of the moon, to show the connection between country and the inveterate endurance of old customs. It is worthy of remark that Jerome, commenting on the very words of Isaiah already quoted about spreading a table for Gad and pouring out a drink offering to Mene, M-E-N-I, observes that it was the custom so late as his time in the 4th century in all cities, especially in Egypt and at Alexandria, to set tables and furnish them with various luxurious articles of food and with goblets containing a mixture of new wine on the last day of the month and the year, and that the people drew omens from them in respect of the fruitfulness of the year. Okay. The Egyptian year began at a different time from ours, but this is a near as possible, only substituting whiskey for wine. The way in which Hogmanay is still observed on the last day of the last month of our year in Scotland, I do not know that any omens are drawn from anything that takes place at that time, but everybody in the south of Scotland is personally cognizant of the fact that on Hogmanay, or the evening before New Year's Day, among those who observe old customs, a table is spread, and that while buns and other dainties are provided by those who can afford them, oat cakes and cheese are brought forth among those who never see oat cakes but on this occasion, and that strong drink forms an essential article of the provision. Isn't paganism fascinating?
Amen.
Continuing the quote, even where the sun was the favorite object of worship, as in Babylon itself and elsewhere, at this festival he was worshipped not merely as the orb of day, but as God incarnate. It was an essential principle of the Babylonian system that the sun, or Baal or Baal, was the one only God. When, therefore, Tammuz was worshipped as God incarnate, that implied also that he was an incarnation of the sun, S-U-N. In the Hindu mythology, which is admitted to be essentially Babylonian, this comes out very distinctly. There, Surya, or the sun, is represented as being incarnate and born for the purpose of subduing the enemies of the gods who, without such a birth, could not have been subdued. Now, we see here that, be it observed, the very name Surya given to the sun over all India is connected with this birth. Though the word had originally a different meaning, it was evidently identified by the priests with the Chaldee zero and made to countenance the idea of the birth of the sun god. The Prakrit name is still nearer the scriptural name of the promised seed. It is Suro. It has been seen in a previous chapter that in Egypt also the sun was represented as born of a goddess. Okay, so sun worship was big time in Egypt, Babylon, and of course the Hindu religion as well. It was no mere astronomic festival then that the pagans celebrated at the winter solstice. That festival at Rome was called the Feast of Saturn. Yes, Saturn. Saturn's cube, right? Saturn. And the mode in which it was celebrated there showed whence it had been derived. The feast, as regulated by Caligula, lasted 5 days. Loose reins were given to drunkenness and revelry. Slaves had a temporary emancipation and used all manner of freedoms with their masters. Okay, now if Saturn or Kronos was, as we have seen reason to believe, for Foranius, the emancipator, the temporary emancipation of the slaves at his festival was exactly in keeping with his supposed character. Continuing to quote, this was precisely the way in which, according to Berosus, the drunken festival of the month Phoebeth, answering toward December, in other words, the festival of Bacchus, was celebrated in Babylon. It was the custom, says he, during the 5 days it lasted, for masters to be in subjection to their servants, and one of them ruled the house, clothed in purple garment like a king. This purple-robed servant was called Zaganus, the man of sport and wantonness, and answered exactly to the Lord of Misrule that in the Dark Ages was chosen in all popish countries to head the revels of Christmas. The wassailing bowl of Christmas had its precise counterpart in the drunken festival of Babylon, and many of the other observations still kept up among ourselves at Christmas came from the very same character. The candles in some parts of England, lighted on Christmas Eve and used so long as the festive seasons last, were equally lighted by the pagans on the eve of the festival of the Babylonian god, due to honor to him, for it was one of the distinguishing peculiarities, of his worship to have lighted wax candles on his altars. The Christmas tree, now so common among pagans, was equally common in pagan Rome and, yes, pagan Egypt. In Egypt, that tree was the palm tree. In Rome, it was the fir. The palm tree denoting the pagan Messiah as Baal Tamar, the fir referring to him as Baal or Baal Berith. Baal Berith. The mother of Dionysus, Tammuz, the sun god and great mediatorial divinity, was mystically said to have been changed into a tree, and when in that state to have brought forth her divine son. If the mother was a tree, the son must have been recognized as the man, the branch. And this entirely accounts for putting of the Yule log into the fire on Christmas Eve and the appearance of the Christmas tree the next morning. As Zarathustra, the seed of the woman, which name also signified Ignigena, or born of the fire, he has to enter the fire on Mother Night, that he may be born the next day out of it, as the branch of God, or the tree that brings all divine gifts to men. Continuing. But you didn't know the background of Christmas, did you?
Mm-mm.
Quite involved. But why? It may be asked, does he enter the fire under the symbol of a log? To understand this, it must be remembered that the divine child born at the winter solstice was born as a new incarnation of the great God. After that, God had been cut in pieces on purpose to revenge his death upon his murderers. Now the great God, cut off in the midst of his power and glory, was symbolized as a huge tree, stripped of all its branches and cut down almost to the ground. That's Nimrod. But the great serpent, the symbol of the life, restoring Asclepius, twists itself around the dead stalk. You have a picture here. And lo, at its side up sprouts a young tree, a tree of an entirely different kind that is destined never to be cut down by hostile power, even the palm tree, the well-known symbol of victory. The Christmas tree, as has been stated, was generally at Rome a different tree, even the fir, but the very same idea as was implied in the palm tree was implied in the Christmas fir. For that covertly symbolized the newborn God as Baal Berith, or Baal Berith, Lord of the covenant, and thus shadowed forth the perpetuity and everlasting nature of his power, not that after having fallen before his enemies, he had risen triumphant over them all. Baal Berith, which differs only in a letter from Baal Berith, Lord of the covenant, signifies Lord of the fig tree. Therefore, the 25th of December, the day that was observed at Rome as the day when the victorious God reappeared on earth, was held at the Natalis Invicti Solis, the birthday of the unconquered sun. Now the Yule log is a dead stock of Nimrod, deified as the sun god, but cut down by his enemies. The Christmas tree is Nimrod redivivus, the slain god, come to life again. In the light reflected by the above statement on customs that still linger among us, the origin of which has been lost in the midst of hoar antiquity, that let the reader look at the singular practice still kept up in the South on Christmas Eve of kissing under the mistletoe bough. That mistletoe bough in the Druidic superstition, which, as we have seen, was derived from Babylon, was a representation of the Messiah, the man, the branch. The mistletoe was regarded as a divine branch, a branch that came from heaven and grew upon a tree that sprung out of the earth. In the Scandinavian story of Balder, the mistletoe branch is distinguished from the lamented god. The Druidic and Scandinavian myths somewhat differed, but yet, even in the Scandinavian story, it is evident that some marvelous power was attributed to the mistletoe branch, for it was able to do what nothing else in the compass of creation could accomplish. It slew the divinity on whom the Anglo-Saxons regarded the empire of their heaven as depending. Now, all that is necessary to unravel this apparent inconsistency is just to understand the branch that had such power as symbolical expression for the true Messiah. The Bacchus of the Greeks came evidently to be recognized as the seed of the serpent. For he is said to have been brought forth by his mother in consequence of intercourse with Jupiter, when that god had appeared in the form of a serpent. Kind of corresponds with Genesis. Jupiter being Satan. If the character of Balder was the same, the story of his death just amounted to this: that the seed of the serpent had been slain by the seed of the woman. This story, of course, must have originated with his enemies, but the idolaters took up what they could not altogether deny, evidently with the view of explaining it away. Thus, by the engrafting of the celestial branch into the earthly tree, heaven and earth, that sin had severed, were joined together, and thus the mistletoe bough became the token of divine reconciliation to man, the kiss being the well-known token of pardon and reconciliation. Whence could such an idea have come? May it not have come from the 85th Psalm, verse 10 and 11? Mercy and truth are met together. Righteousness and peace have kissed each other. Truth shall spring out of the earth in consequence of the coming of the promised Messiah, and righteousness shall look down from heaven. Now, Satan likes to twist Scripture. Continuing, certain it is that the psalm was written soon after the Babylonish captivity, and as the multitudes of the Jews, or Israelites, after that event still remained in Babylon under the guidance of inspired men, such as Daniel, as a part of the divine word, it must have been communicated to them as well as to their kinsmen in Palestine. Babylon was at that time the center of the civilized world, and thus paganism, corrupting the divine symbol as it ever has done, had opportunities of sending forth its debased counterfeit of the truth to all the ends of the earth through the mysteries that were affiliated with a great central system in Babylon. Thus, the very customs of Christmas still existent cast surprising light at once on the revelations of grace made to all the earth and the efforts made by Satan and his emissaries to materialize, carnalize, and degrade them. It's all carnal. It's all the flesh. It's not spiritual, folks. In many countries, the boar was sacrificed to the god for the injury a boar was fabled to have done him. According to one version of the story of the death of Adonis, or Tammuz, it was, as we have seen, in consequence of a wound from the tusk of a boar that he died. The Phrygian Attis, the beloved of Cybele, whose story was identified with that of Adonis, was fabled to have perished in like manner, but the tusk of a boar. By the tusk of a boar. Therefore, Diana, who though commonly represented in popular myths only as the huntress Diana, was in reality the great mother of the gods, more mother goddess worship, has frequently the boar's head as her accompaniment in token not of any mere success in the chase, but of her triumph over the grand enemy of the idolatrous system, in which she occupied so conspicuous a place. According to the Theocritus, Venus was reconciled to the boar that killed Adonis, because when brought in chains before her, it pleaded so pathetically that it had not killed her husband of malice prepense, but only through accident. But yet, in memory of the deed that the mystic boar had done, many a boar lost its head or was offered in sacrifice to the offended goddess. In Smith, Diana is represented with a boar's head lying beside her on the top of a heap of stones and in the accompanying woodcut, figure 28. Can't see these figures unless you get the Bible study. In which the Roman Emperor Trajan is represented burning incense to the same goddess. The boar's head forms a very prominent figure. On Christmas Day, the continental Saxons offered a boar in sacrifice to the sun to propitiate her for the loss of her beloved Adonis. The reader will remember the sun was a goddess. Mallet says they offered the largest hog they could get to Frigga. Example, the mother of Balder, the lamented one. In Egypt, swine were offered once a year at the feast of the moon, to the moon and Bacchus or Osiris, and to them only it was lawful to make such an offering. In Rome, a similar observance had evidently existed, for a boar formed the great article at the feast of Saturn, as appears from the following words of Martial. Quote, that boar will make you a good Saturnalia, end quote. Hence, the boar's head is still a standing dish in England at the Christmas dinner, when the reason of it is long since forgotten. Yea, the Christmas goose and Yule cakes were essential articles in the worship of the Babylonian Messiah, and that worship was practiced both in Egypt and at Rome. You see the Egyptian god Seb with his symbol, the goose, and the sacred goose on a stand is offered in sacrifice. Wilkinson, in reference to Egypt, shows that the favored offerings of Osiris was a goose, and moreover that the goose could not be eaten except in the depth of winter. As to Rome, Juvenal says, quote, that Osiris, if offended, could be pacified only by a large goose and a thin cake, end quote. Continuing, in many countries we have evidence of a sacred calendar attached to the goose. It is well known that the capital of Rome was on one occasion saved when, on the point of being surprised by the Gauls in the dead of night by the cackling of geese sacred to Juno, goddess of the air, kept in the temple of Jupiter, the accompanying woodcut proves that the goose in Asia Minor was the symbol of Cupid, just as it was the symbol of Seb in Egypt. Cupid didn't shoot real arrows. In India, the goose accompanied a similar position, for in that land we read of the sacred Brahmani goose, or goose sacred to the Brahma. Yes, god of Brahma. Finally, the monuments of Babylon show that the goose possessed like a mystic character in Chaldea, and that it was offered in sacrifice there as well in Rome or Egypt, for there the priest is seen with the goose in the one hand and a sacrificing knife in the other. Okay. So we see that the sacrificial goose, rather than the protective shepherd, is the pattern in some new religions. There can be no doubt then that the pagan festival at the winter solstice, in other words, Christmas, was held in honor of the birth of the Babylonian Messiah. It's taken from Two Babylons by Alexander Hislop, pages 95 to 102. Okay. All right. Pick it up next time, folks. This is all about worshiping the host of heaven. Worship the true Creator, Jesus Christ. God bless you. Thank you.